So I've been getting a lot of people ask me to take a look at this new terminal application called Ghostty. And I've got to say, playing around with it for a few hours, I really like this terminal. So this is Ghostty, and it's spelled Ghostty, because you got to have the TTY as part of the name, right? Like with Alacrity and Kitty and now Ghostty. They've got to fit that TTY in the name. But you know, this is a cross-platform terminal emulator that uses platform native UI and GPU acceleration. Now, this is a little bit misleading because cross-platform, you would assume, oh, it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. But when you go to the download page, let's go to download, you can see, well, we've got a Mac OS build and we've got a Linux build, of course. Nothing for Windows here. Now, I should also mention that this thing just recently had like a 1.0 release, so it's been like alpha beta for a while, so it's just now really out in the wild for everybody to use. And I think that's part of why Ghostty has been in the news a lot, probably in a lot of Linux and open source software related media, so people are talking about it. And I had some users ask me about it, so I went ahead and grabbed the Linux package of Ghostty. Now, on Arch Linux, all I needed to do was just install it from the repos, because Ghostty is in the extra repos on Arch, and Ghostty is in some of the other distributions repos. I believe you can get it with Emerge on Gen 2. I believe you can get it with DNF on Fedora. I'm sure Debian probably has it on Ubuntu. You can install it via a snap package. There is a snap build of Ghostty out there, and of course, if you want to use snaps on any Linux distribution, obviously, you know, you can always install it via snap. So what are some of the notable features with Ghostty? Well, it supports multi-window tabs, splits. It's got support for ligatures for those that need it. So it should have, you know, good, you know, Unicode character support, get all your little weird glyphs and things like that. Also, it does have some GPU acceleration, so it should be fast. So for those of you that like the speed of terminals like Alacrity and Kitty, Ghostty should be similar in terms of performance. And one of the things they mentioned was the native UI design. So what they're doing is, depending on which platform they're building Ghostty for, they're building it with a toolkit that makes sense for that operating system. So the Linux version of Ghostty is GTK/libadwaita. So yeah, it's going to have really good integration as far as, for example, if you're using this on the GNOME desktop environment, you know, Ghostty should fit right in on that. You should be able to do all of your changing of light mode and dark mode and things like that. You know, notifications should be integrated in the desktop environment, yada, yada, yada. So let me go ahead and show you Ghostty. So let me switch to a different workspace and launch Ghostty. So this is what it looks like out of the box. So again, it is a GTK application. You get a little toolbar here. So you get the little plus button, which, as you can imagine, it is for tabbing. So if I want a new tab, I can hit the plus button, and now I've got the first tab and the second tab here. And of course, everything can be keyboard driven or mouse driven. So you can click on things, or you can use the keyboard to switch between tabs. And it's very customizable. We're going to get into the configuration options here in just a second. Moving over on the toolbar, you have this little grid icon. So this is kind of your multi-window view. So if I click on it, it's almost like a dashboard for like the GNOME desktop environment, or, you know, some of those full screen dashboards that'll show you all your open windows. It's got that going on. So if I've got, you know, 10 different tabs, I just hit that little multi-window icon and I get all 10 tabs. And if I want to choose one, I just pick the one I want. Or of course, I could hit escape on the keyboard to also just escape out of that and be back into where I was originally. There is a menu system here that has a few different options. For example, it's got some basic stuff like opening a new window, a new tab, or splitting right or down. So it doesn't have up or left, but you can split up and left. If you want to create a config file, you can add key bindings specifically to split in any direction you want to go. But to split right, I could just click split right here and I get a right split. And if I go back into the menu, split down, I get a downward split. And there are default key bindings for these. I don't particularly like their key bindings because I don't think they make a lot of sense. Shift Control O to split right. I would prefer something that was more Vim-like. So if I'm splitting right, I want something involving the L key, which is the right motion with Vim. If I'm doing something down, I should do something with the J key, but they're using Shift Control E. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change a lot of these key bindings here. I believe to kill a window, it's Control D. Let's see if that actually works. Control D, yeah, so that killed all those splits there. But if I go back to the browser here on the Ghostty website, which is ghostty.org, they do have this configuration documentation, and it is pretty extensive. There is a ton of things you can do in a config. They give a little bit of an example of how a config file can be created and some of the options. Now, this here is an example of just, setting 5 different things in a config file, but there are a million different option references that you can set. So here in the sidebar, you can actually see there is a ton of things that you can set. So a lot of different values, a lot of different key bindings you can set. And I've played with this just a little bit because I really didn't like their default key bindings for common tasks such as splitting and closing frames and stuff like that. So here is what I ended up doing with my config. So let me cd into.config/ghosty. And let me ls, and I have config.bac backup. And what this is I wanted to show you Ghostty in its default form before I went ahead and showed you a basic configuration file. So let me move config.bac to just config, and now let me reload the configuration, and you can do the reload configuration from the menu system, or you can do a key binding for that. But let me reload. You can see reloaded the configuration. If there was any kind of error in your config file, you're going to get an error message. And let me show you my config file. So I'm going to go ahead and open it with Vim. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. So this is just a very simple example. Obviously, you can set colors, color values here in Ghostty. So you can see we've set background and foreground. I believe these are the default values in Ghostty anyway. I just went ahead and duplicated them here in the config just as documentation. But really what I wanted to change was splits. So I changed my splits to be Shift Control HJKL, depending on whether we're going left, down, up, right. So the standard Vim motion keys. I also changed the key binding to reload our config. So if I make an edit and I want to do a quick reload, a hot reload, right, I can do a Shift Control R for reload config. I have font family equals nothing. So by default, Ghostty defaults to using JetBrains Mono, I believe is the default font, which looks fine to me. I'm fine with that. But if I wanted to change that value to something else, I could change the font, of course. But that is some of what I've done with the config so far. And let's show you those key bindings, those new key bindings in action. So if I do Control Shift L for a right split, now I get a right split. Let me zoom back out. And what's cool is the zooms only affect the one frame, right? So, this frame over here did not get zoomed out. You can actually manage them separately, which is really neat. Now I'm back over in this frame. If I want to do another right split, I can do Control Shift L. And now I've split this in half. So that is a little too scrunched up, especially with my ASCII art there, but that's fine. Control Shift J to split down. And if I want to kill those frames, right, remember Control D is a default key binding. Of course, I could change that if I wanted to, but I'm fine with Control D basically to delete, these frames that I no longer need. So that is a little bit of the basics of Ghostty. Really neat little application. Again, it's just now 1.0. So the very first, I guess, official release, non-beta release. There could still be bugs, of course. I'm sure there probably are some bugs with this piece of software, but it runs just fine. Of course, we didn't actually see me do anything as far as running any applications here in Ghostty, but as far as I can tell, everything runs beautifully here. And again, I do like the splits. I do like having tabs for those that want to play with tabs. For me, I would just deal with splits, but if you prefer tabs, you can certainly do tabs and splits. You can combine on both. And remember, you always have your little multi window view here. You can actually see I still have tabs. I have a tab with those 4 splits, and I forgot I had a tab over here with just the 1 window. So that is neat that you can mix and match. Now, before I go, I need to thank a few special people. I need to thank the producers of this episode: Matt, James, Steve, Armor Dragon, Darloff, Daedalus, GDR, George, Lee, Matthew, Methos, Arion, Paul, Peace, Arch, and Fedora, Realities for Less, Red Prophet, Roland, Soul Astry, Tenrin, War Gentoo, and Ubuntu, and Willie. These guys, they're my highest tier patrons over on Patreon. Without these guys, this quick look at Ghostty would not have been possible. Show's also brought to you by each and every one of these fine ladies and gentlemen. All these names you're seeing on the screen right now, these are all my supporters over on Patreon, because I don't have any corporate sponsors. I'm sponsored by you guys, the community, and if you like my work, please subscribe to DistroTube over on Patreon. All right, guys. Peace.